Hello, welcome back to Mad Time with Professor Prime, and I am your host, as always, Professor Prime. And today we're going to be talking about math and Dragon Ball Z Kakarot. So, here's how it's going to go. I am going to talk about Dragon Ball Z Kakarot and how math plays a role in multiple components of the game. My initial focus will be around combat and gameplay in general. And then, I'll expand throughout or around or however it's going to go. And talk about different things like the world that you play in and things that are behind the scenes. And I'll also be talking about my personal experience with the game. Because for me, it's been an absolute blast. But I did put off playing it for a while, and I'll get into that as we go on in the video too. And my approach to this long form video has been different than the other long form videos that I've made, because unlike a lot of the other ones where I'm talking about things in this massive video and I might talk about things like specific parts later, here it's the other way around. I've made several videos about Dragon Ball Z Kakarot leading up to this, and that's done a few things. It's allowed me to just express to you all how much fun I was having with the game, as well as pointing out how math has just been all around it and how it's in Dragon Ball in general. And it's also allowed me to keep better track of my thoughts, and it's been a fun way to approach the situation. That being said, I'm going to get into things, and you can definitely assume Dragon Ball Z spoilers, and just assume Dragon Ball spoilers. So I think that's fair game. Since I said that, if you don't want spoilers, it's fine. I get that. If you're cool with things, let's get into it proper. So with Dragon Ball Z Kakarot, for those who don't know, it came out I think 2020. And the idea is it was supposed to be a celebration of the Dragon Ball Z anime, but it came out a year after the 30th anniversary, and I gotta imagine for development reasons. That being said, so Dragon Ball Z Kakarot. I'm gonna get into why I find that funny later, that title, but the main thing is it's an action RPG slash fighter, however you want to classify it. It's got a lot going on, right? You could throw adventure in there too, but however you cut it, the idea is it adapts the story of the Dragon Ball Z anime, which covers the manga section of Dragon Ball, and they take some liberties here, and there's a lot of good, some bad, some awesome. So I'll talk about how, like I said, math plays a big factor in the gameplay, and kind of go from there. So one of the big things is it's an action game where you're fighting your opponents, right? And there's math in just that fundamental part of the game. There's math in the damage that you're dishing out to your opponent, and there's math in how you take damage, right? There's math in your health, math in your ki, and again math in the damage and how you dish it out. And so as you fight your opponents, it's this back and forth, right? You are trying to not take damage or recover damage while you are trying to dish out as much damage as possible to your opponent, right? And so there's math in that just basic level, and I think that's really cool. And even if you don't feel like you're doing math, you absolutely are, right? You don't always have to see the math to do it, right? You don't always have to be conscious of the math to do it. You don't always have to write down the math to do it. But just so we're clear, Dragon Ball Z Kakarot does not hide the math at all, or at least it doesn't hide all of it. So you go through the game, going through the story of Dragon Ball Z, and as you do that, and you fight your opponents, you also go on quests. You find different items, and there's math in all of that, and how everything functions and flows, right? Because in addition to the math and the combat, right, there's math in you traversing the world, math in you flying from point A from point B, math in you using fast travel, math in you getting items, because these items and the amount that you can store, it impacts how you're playing the game, right? Because you might need certain items and certain amounts for different missions. You might just be accruing items that you can sell later. And as you're going and you're accruing these items, some of these can be used to like cook, right? And when you're cooking food, it can do a variety of different things, right? If you're at a campsite, it can help recover, your health, your key, as well as give a different stat boosts, and you can take different items to get increased ones, right? And the items, they give a lot of different effects. Just some off the top of my head, or like some increase the damage that you do, whether it be melee or key. Some increase your defense, and others just like just generally boost some of the crazy things you can do. There's a lot of stats going on. And I think that's all cool. So it's just like there's a lot of math, like just on the surface and then expanding. And then this is where I think it gets interesting. So yes, there's math in the combat, how it functions, how it flows, how the stats are, and how that affects gameplay. But there's also, of course, math and how your character progresses, because it's a leveling system. And so you're gaining levels, right? That and they're depicted numerically. And you're gaining experience, also depicted numerically. And your stats are increasing. And what's really cool to me about that is it mirrors how things are depicted in the anime, in the manga, right? Because these characters are getting more powerful. And like you can numerically see that here and within the source material. Not only do you see that like visually, not only are you told that, but there is something that you may have guessed that a lot have Dragon Ball fans have held on to, that is used to depict character strength. And the idea is that there's like power levels, right? Or battle power, whatever you prefer. And power scaling is the result of all that, right? And I think that's fascinating and that's cool. And I've talked about that in numerous videos because I've made a lot of Dragon Ball videos at this point. Math and Dragon Ball videos. It's one of my favorite things, right? Like I grew up on Dragon Ball, and it's been an impactful series, like in so many different ways, right? It's awesome. But anyway, my whole point though is like with power levels, battle power again, whatever you prefer. The idea is they were used in two really cool ways. Like in the beginning, and well, I was gonna say like in the beginning they're used to like pretty straightforward, and then like kind of used like subversively, but it kind of goes hand in hand. But my point is there are two major ways the power levels are used. One is to depict the actual power and of the opponents, so like numerically speaking, right? Like and it's just like it's cool because you might have like characters that are say like, oh well, they're at like 300, and then like at the beginning, like when you have like Goku and Piccolo at the beginning of Dragon Ball Z, before they get fighting and take off the weighted clothing, they're both around 300. I forget the exact levels, but like Raditz is somewhere like 1200, I think, and that's a huge difference. And like, yes, a huge difference, like just subtracting the difference between the numbers, but you could also look at things as you can look at things proportionally, right? And I think that becomes useful going on. But no matter how you cut it, you see math being used to depict strength. And then the other way that I like hinted at was like things are used subversively. And I think that's cool because like Dragon Ball Z gave one of the best lessons on stat, math, and data analysis, and like context is king. And I say that because if you watch the series, right, or if you read the manga, whatever the case may be, or played some of the games, right, what you may have realized is, so while power levels can be accurate sometimes they're not, because people are hiding their power, right? Or in the case of our like main characters, not only are they hiding powers, but they have the ability to jump up their key like in an instant. And I think that's cool. And I think that's awesome because like when you look at Frieza and his troops, the idea is like, okay, so they're using this technology and they're able to get to these numerical readings that are representative of these people's powers, but they don't know their ability. They don't have all context. So yeah, the numbers are important, but what they represent is more important, and you may not have all the context. And this is true of real life too, right? You may be collecting this data, you may be collecting that data, but you don't know the full situation always. And while the data can help with that, sometimes this reverence of data can be something that hinders you. Not always, and data is great, but it's like, don't forget about the data analysis part, right? You need to not only like ask yourself what makes sense, but like where does the data come from? How is it being measured? What may you be missing? You can't possibly know everything, but you should be considering more. And I go off on this tangent though, because the idea of power levels and like power scaling has been something that hasn't really left the Dragon Ball. Sorry, something that hasn't really left the Dragon Ball community. And I think that's because at the end of the day, whether we like it or not, right? We approach a lot of things mathematically because we're trying to make sense of it, and I think that's cool. But relating it back to the game, I think as we see the characters and we're like, okay, where their power levels are raising throughout the series, like we can see that in the game through the amount of the amount of experience that they're getting and the levels that they're reaching, and how that's handled. And to me, it's handled quite well because you see, the thing is, right? If you have a character that isn't on screen for a while, they're on some side adventure or they're healing up from a big battle. When you get back to them in the story, they grow, right? You can see how much experience they're getting and they level up. And you see this handled throughout the game. So it's like I feel like the characters, at least in relation to each other, are at the right levels. Right? They're pretty comparable, and I think it's interesting because in terms of playable characters, you don't actually get to play the whole like Dragon Ball Z cast, right? Like it's mainly the Saiyans and Piccolo. like that's the whole thing. Like the other ones are support characters, and if you look at how things are projected throughout the game, the Saiyans and Piccolo are definitely growing with the top Saiyans like Goku, Gohan, and Vegeta growing the most out of anyone. And so I think that's depicted not only in the source material but throughout the game itself, and I think that's actually pretty cool. So with that in mind, you see mapping used across the board, and not only is it used in the gameplay, but it's used in the world that you play in, right? So you have this massive world that's supposed to be Earth. One of the worlds is supposed to be Earth, but then you can go to Namek and then like New Namek later, King Kai's planet, Supreme Kai's planet, stuff like that, right? And the thing is, right, with these worlds, they had to construct these worlds, right? And they had to make them huge to feel like an actual world. And in that world, things have to be designed and constructed in a way where things are proportional, right? You should have a good idea of the world and how it compares to your characters, and so a lot of math goes into making sure things are proportional and that perspective is done correctly to give you that feeling that this is a vast world that you're exploring. And not only is just like the scope and scale of that world mathematical in nature, but different features that come with it. For instance, if you go and you're flying over water, you can see it reflect light, and that effect is mathematical in nature. And you see different things pop up as you're exploring the world, and again, all of it is mathematical. The nature parts, the animals moving along, the speeds at which they're moving, how you're interacting with the character. And I think one of the really cool things is I think they've done an excellent job in this game of making it pretty fast paced and giving you that ability to move fast, because these are insanely fast characters, right? And I think this game more than some others has done a really good job of that. And then there's math in the world and how it's created and what it's doing, and there's math behind the programming aspect, right? There's math behind the marketing in a game like this, and just any game, right? Math and putting it on these different systems and understanding these different specs. There's math in you, the player, and what you're putting into things, right? Just math across the board. It's a beautiful thing. And so while you can only play as certain characters, you can decide how this experience is going to shape up for you, even though you are playing a story that, come on, let's be honest, most of y'all know because you've seen it a million times, right? Even though that's the case, you're choosing how things go, right? Because you're choosing what to do. You're choosing how to progress, choosing what to focus on, right? You're putting the time, energy, and effort in, and you're boosting up your characters left and right, right? And so I think that's pretty cool. And some other things that like stand out to me, mathematically speaking, because they're cool, is that I mentioned in some of my videos. I'll mention here briefly, kind of in a series of things before talking about some other stuff. So there are some really cool ways outside of like the initial training stuff that I said and leveling up that stand out to me. I like how they handle transformations in this game. Because normally you're not told like what increase you're getting if you go into a transformation in any sort of game. So you're not told like how much your damage output will be for Super Saiyan, right? Stuff like that. So I think that's interesting. And so the way things work here in this game, so like let's say you're dealing with Super Saiyan 2, Super Saiyan 3, that sort of stuff, right? I mean, there's other transformations, but just to start, right? Like there's this idea that not only do you have Super Saiyan, but you have Super Saiyan level 1, Super Saiyan level 2, Super Saiyan level 3, then you have Super Saiyan 2 level 1, level 2, and level 3. The same for Super Saiyan 3, right? And not only is there math in like how these categories appear to you, but there's math in what they do. At each step, right, there's damage increase. And I don't have the numbers on me right now, but like for Super Saiyan, for instance, I think it starts off giving you a 20% damage increase at level 1, and then on level 2 that bumps up to 35%, and then at level 3 that bumps up to 50%. And Super Saiyan 2 level 1 starts at 50% damage increase, but then goes to 75% increase, and then 100%. And then like Super Saiyan 3, Super Saiyan God, Super Saiyan God, Super Saiyan, or Super Saiyan Blue, whatever you prefer, they all have different things. And like Gohan's ultimate form, they all have different boosts that like get progressively higher. And at each step, like when you master a form, it starts where like the next one will, oh sorry, it ends where the next one will start. And I think that's cool. One, because it's outright telling you the amount of damage that you're going to be increasing by, right? But I also like this idea because in the series, you get different grades like of Super Saiyan, and even if you didn't have those grades, there's this idea that over time, right? Like a lot of people, myself included, you know, see these characters having such a fine mastery of ki that they can control the kind of like damage output they're doing, right? And it kind of makes sense, right? Because if they couldn't, they would be just wrecking everything if you apply too much like logic to it. But anyway, I just think it's cool because it's a depiction of the damage that you're doing in the game, and I feel like you can actually feel it. And I think that's cool. And so one of the things though with Super Saiyan though, the Super Saiyan forms is that your ki will continuously decrease while you're in that form. So it's a bit of a trade-off, but if you ask me, a pretty good one because like you're dishing out more damage, and yes, you're losing ki, but you can gather ki, right? That's part of the gameplay, right? So with that, right, you're building up ki, and you can lose that by going Super Saiyan and all that stuff, or you can use that by doing some super melee attacks or super ki attacks, and so you have to, as you're facing your opponent, decide what you want to do. Because you could just like do a standard melee attack and whittle down their health, but you can do some major ones, but that's going to cost you some ki. But again, you can gather ki, so you have to do what you have to do to do that and decide what's the risk, right? And if you ask me, the transformations, they're worth doing because they dish out damage in a way that you can actually notice the difference. And if you didn't just notice it, you can see it numerically because you can see how much damage you're dishing out to your opponent, and if you transform, you can see how that increases. And I think all of that is cool. And then with this idea of like math showing what's going on in the screen, what's going on in the story, I like that you can get to like the Battle of Gods and Resurrection of F arcs, where you reach Super Saiyan God and the Battle of Gods arc, and then like Super Saiyan Blue, and the Resurrection arc, right? And what's cool to me is you can see the crazy power gains. Because for me, and I gotta imagine a lot of other people, like the main characters you're playing as, Notably, the Saiyans like Goku, Vegeta, and Gohan are all like in their 80s level wise, or around their 70s by the end of the game. Again, for me and like some other people. Um, but then you get to the battle guards are if you get the DLC right, and what you'll notice is Beerus like at the beginning, you're training with Whis. They changed some story elements with this, but you're training with Whis first, but you can challenge Beerus early, and like if you're at level 80, can you guess what his level is? Like it's 250, a whopping 250, and so it's like you can challenge him, and you will get squash. Like he will body you, and I think it's interesting because what I noticed as you play, like the damage you dish out and the damage you take depends on the level in your opponent's, right? So like if you're considerably higher than your opponent, you're dishing out a lot of damage and you're not taking that much. And for this battle, right, like Beerus was on such a high level compared to where I was at, like 250 versus like 80, that the damage increased to the point where it's like technically I'm damaging this dude, but like I'm doing one damage per turn, right? So it's just like it's crazy. Um, and I just like that when you're training with Whis, you're getting yoked. Because you're doing like different missions where it's just like so you have to have certain levels to do these missions where it's like well you're breaking through your limits in some of these missions and you're just regularly training in others, and as you're training one of the things they introduce is different items that will boost your experience. They come in different forms of sacred water, so you might get like sacred water and the super sacred water, then supreme sacred water, and so on and so forth. Things like mega and ultimate are the other ones, but the idea is like they increase your experience, but there's a caveat. So like at each different level, there's a point where you can no longer use it to power up your characters. Like for the regular Sacred Water, it's like, oh, well, it can power up your characters, give them experience up until level 50. And then you would have to use the different types of Sacred Water after that. But my point is, all right, if you're battling enough and you're putting time in, you could get yoked. Like within no time. I got like Goku and Vegeta up to like 200. It was wild. Um, and for a while, like as I was going through those DLC arcs, the level cap was increasing, and by the end of it, 300. Um, Now there's more DLC coming, so that might change, but that's where I'm at now. But these are like a couple of examples of some of the things that I just like noticed. And then what I want to do in the next part, because what I want to do is I'm going to pause this. Like, I mean, you probably won't notice it if I do it right, because I've had to do this in before. But like, my camera's gonna get to a point where it's going to like cut me off, which I don't want to happen. So I'm just gonna get ahead of that, and I'll see you in the next part where I'll be talking about my feelings on the game, the good, the bad, and the awesome, and also some things from Dragon Ball Z that still pretty much get reflected in the game that are mathematical in nature. Mathematical. Anyway, I'll see you very soon. All right, so like one of the things that I really like about Dragon Ball Z Kakarot is there's so many things that they do mathematically that help illustrate the story, right? Like illustrate the power that your characters are gaining. That like it puts you right in it. You're growing as these characters in ZR. It's like how you always read it, right? How you always watched it, and you get to be part of that. It's cool, and I think that's awesome. And like some things from Z real quick that I've like talked about recently that stand out to me. That also get reflected in the game is still that idea of like mapping at the front and center of everything. So, for instance, like one of the cool things with Goku versus Frieza is things kind of make sense mathematically. Um, what I mean, so at this point, right, there's a lot of power levels that are going around, and after like the Frieza saga, or rather after like Trunks shows up towards the start of the Android arc, or at the start of the Android arc, depending on how you look at that. Um, Everything else isn't real, right? So I mentioned earlier in this video about power level and power scaling, and right, the Z is where it started, and so I wanted to bring up the Goku versus Frieza thing though, because so if you look at Goku, at the end of the Vegeta saga, right, or the end of the Saiyan saga, however you want to name things, right? He's around 8,000 in his base. With Kaioken, I think up to 24,000, right? Or no, because he did it times four Kaioken, not just the times three to fight off Vegeta with the Gallic Gun Kamehameha, like Beam Struggle. You know the one. So I guess somewhere around 32,000, or something to that effect. Anyway, right? But like his base is 8,000, and that's what I want to focus on to start. So during the Namek saga, characters were getting boosts left and right, and I feel like the game does a good job of adjusting those sort of things, right? Um, and so when Goku finally, gets to Namek and he finally gets to face Frieza, he's made some massive gains, and some of the numbers I'll pull, or I'll say, or based off the numbers in the series, and that I sent you 7 to fill in some gaps, right? So anyway, Goku leaves Earth at 8,000. By the time he's fighting Frieza, he's like at 3 million for his power level, which is like just fundamentally bonkers. And just so we're clear, when Goku finally arrives on Namek, and he's like powering up. I think it's something like he gets up to 180,000 when he's fighting Ginyu. Um, but my point is that's already a large jump, and then he's 3 million after like healing up from some damage, right? After the whole Ginyu swap, and getting damaged. So he goes from 8 million, sorry, 8,000 when he left for Namek. Over the course of several days, he gets a crazy boost due to the gravity chamber, or not gravity chamber, just gravity machine, like in his ship. And he gets this major boost. And then he faces Frieza. He's at 3 million. He can go up to Kaioken times 20. So he can get up to 60 million in terms of power level. When he faces Frieza and he's going all out like that, Frieza is at his 50% form. So that suggests Frieza can get up to 120 million. And for Super Saiyan, it is a 50 times multiplier, at least initially, right? And there's some wiggle room to say, oh well, maybe you can adjust that and get higher levels later on, or dim things down. But my point is, its general multiplier is a 50 times multiplier. So if Goku was at 3 million, then this would bring him to 150 million, which we see. And to me, that makes sense. He's at 150 million, and Frieza's at 120 million. And it's a huge gap, whether you're looking at it just the number wise, which is like a 30 million power difference, or just looking at things proportionally, right? To see just how they stack up together. Either way, Goku wins that battle, and I feel like they adequately show that both in the manga, or sorry, all in the manga, the anime, and in this game. Which that was a bit of a tangent, but it's just it's something that I like, because it's just hey, you want to show that this person is stronger than that person. So here are some numbers for you, and I think it made things clear for a lot of people, and that's why so many people in the Dragon Ball community latch on to that idea. But I thought that was cool, and I thought the entrance of Trunks is cool because okay, what happens between Goku and Vegeta, or sorry, Goku and Frieza, and the levels that they're fighting at, and then Trunks just comes in, and he wrecks Frieza, he wrecks his father, and just it's a good example of just how to set up a cool entrance and also show the level of the next threat. And just math is underlying it all, because it's oh well, if this character was at this level and this other character comes in and just wrecks them, then this character is really powerful. But oh wait, there's another character stronger than them. So it's just cool to kind of see it. But back to the game specifically. There's a lot of mathematical things just within the game itself, how it's structured, whether we're talking about the main story or the insane amount of side quests and what you can get for them. And for the record, a lot of side quests, even though some are, I'm going to be real with you, boring, they can net you some, experience. And then, There's math in doing these side quests and collecting the items needed for some of these side quests or for beating the opponents. And then there's math and experience that you gain and some of the items that you gain. There's math in collecting the Dragon Balls. There's again like math all over the gameplay and the combat and how you're rising, how you're using your techniques. You when you're setting things for your characters, there's like a certain amount of attacks you could do. Like you could have 4 slots for your regular attacks, 4 slots for your transformation. So you have to be selective. And for the transformation, it's not usually an issue. But when you get to be like Goku, for instance, just racking up transformations, you have to like decide what you want to do. And for me, I just want the most powerful going all the way down. But you can pick and choose what you want to do and decide the benefits of using this form or that form if you're going to use the form at all, right? And then there's the skill tree part. I have not mentioned the skill tree part. So throughout the game, right, you're building up experience, you're progressing through the story, you're doing certain things, and you're building up your skill tree. In some cases, this allows you to learn attacks or learn techniques, and a lot of times it's boosting stats. And then there's also like the training grounds where you can learn new attacks, but you have to have a certain amount of like medals to do this challenge or that challenge. And throughout the game, you're collecting these medals, you're collecting different type of ores that will allow you to power different things in your skill tree. So there's a lot of just math going on with how things branch out and how everything functions and flows. You can't have this game without math. You can't have anything without math because math is everything. It's in everything. It is everything. But we don't always teach it that way. So now for the more opinion part, if you just you listen to all that. So it's a game. Dragon Ball Z Kakarot is a game that I like, a game that I deeply enjoy. I put around 150 hours into that game, and I've played it for like a month. So clearly, I dig it. But there are some ways that I think it could have been better. To start, kind of jokingly, but also kind of completely seriously, I think it's kind of crazy that it's Dragon Ball Z Kakarot. Don't get me wrong. I get why it's Dragon Ball Z Kakarot because the idea is it's celebrating Dragon Ball Z after 30 years. It came out a year after that 30th year anniversary, but that's still an idea, and that's fine and that's good. Even though we've gotten a lot of stories from Z, right? But it's if you're going to do the life of Goku, then you probably should do the life of Goku. So I feel you should include things like the regular Dragon Ball, right? Like that whole thing, Goku as a kid going into adulthood, as well as Z, and now Super. And that's just how I feel in general because there would be more to do, even though there's no shortage of things to do in Dragon Ball Z Kakarot. But it would also make sense to me because if we are following the life of Goku, then why focus on the Z section? The Z section, right, has Goku the most absent because this dude in Z, he's either dead, training, sick, or some combination of the things. Goku in Z is just just as much a plot device as he is a character, maybe even more so. So it's kind of weird to me to focus on that area and call it, Kakarot, Dragon Ball Z Kakarot, and say it's focusing on the life of Goku, and it's just from a fundamentally functional level that doesn't work. And you can see that in the game because Goku gets taken out of the story a lot, and I'm still fine with that because it plays well. It's me nitpicking on it because is it just the life of Goku though? Because dude was gone a lot in Z. I'm just saying. And another thing is I wish they would have covered the time skip and introduced Oob, but whatever. That's a whole nother thing. But the thing is, it does a lot right. It's fun to play. And some of the slice of life parts do enhance the game. Some of them absolutely don't. But I am glad they exist and that you get to explore the Dragon Ball world a bit more and go to some locales that you're familiar with that you've seen a bunch of times, but you get to experience it in a new context because you're there and there's more interaction with you and the characters. And so I think it excels at a lot of things, but again, there's some things where it's just I don't get what they were doing. So one of my things is they made some character changes, and it's an adaptation. That's fine, but it's just I didn't understand them because it made to me most of the characters be more unlikable, and in some cases, kind of just different personality. So characters like Vegeta and Piccolo, for instance, I felt like they were depicted in a less likable way. And in Vegeta's case, yeah, there's several things that he does that's unlikable. But one of the things that is appealing about that character is this dude, like, for a while he was killing anyone that wasn't him, and he was just going around wrecking things, causing trouble. But he was fun, right? He was thinking, and he was a jerk, but he had wit. He would do things, and like in Dragon Ball Z Kakarot, he's just a dick. Like, there's no other way to say it. And it's just like, but he's not entertaining. So it's just like, this is deeply unpleasant to listen to. And like Piccolo, he gets the same treatment, but to a less extent or lesser extent. Now, what gets me? What really gets me is like, okay, fine. Some of the characters are more unpleasant now. Whatever. I'll just keep that moving. But Tien, what did they do to Tien? They made a clutch character to me, right? They made this clutch character, this dude who's like pretty confident, I think, and they kind of made him like really depressing because he's not a jerk in this game, not at all. But like he kind of like throughout the game gets increasingly insecure about like how he stacks up to the Sands, and it's a bummer because it's not just like, oh, a hateful insecurity, like, oh my god, those Sands, screw those guys. It's like it's a depressing insecurity because it's like, oh man, I'll never catch up to the Sands. There's not a lot that I can do, and it's like, man, that's a bummer, Tien. That's a bummer. But yeah, so there's changes like that I don't understand, and like Frieza, he's always been a dick. That's always been a thing. But like, I feel like that's all that he is in this game too, like Vegeta, and that's not as fun. And Goku, I think, and I guess this is fitting. He gets a bit more good things done to him. Like, I feel like he gets time to shine, like in terms of being more compassionate to his family and friends. It's like that's always there, but I mean, Goku's also Goku, so he's gonna do what he's gonna do. But I feel like here you get to see a different side of him. But like I feel like that's also at the expense of a lot of other characters. And another big thing is like I felt like some of the cutscenes where they're fighting, when they show that off, can actually be quite good. But I feel like that was kind of like few and far between. That being said, I do like this game. It is great. I enjoyed just playing like the story of Z in a different way. I enjoyed the stuff with Battle of God and Resurrection F, like in terms of like powering up and just to get to see, your characters is you make them mathematically speaking stupidly broken. But you know what I didn't expect? Is I made my characters mathematically speaking stupidly broken. Um, they got so super stupidly broken, supremely stupidly broken, superbly stupidly broken that they started to break the game. I'm not even kidding on that, right? Like, you get to a point where your characters get so powerful and they're able to do these massive techniques, but then your game, or at least for me, the game starts to bug out a little bit in some of those like situations. Like, for instance, Goku doing an ultimate spirit bomb that can wreck things if you're not careful or trying to do too much at once. So my thing was like, oh my god, I wanted to make my characters broken, but I didn't want to break the game. Jeez. But yeah, so there's a lot of good. There was some bad, and then there's some awesome because I feel like it really does a good job of letting you go through the world of Z. And I think it does a really good job of like having fast-paced fighting and just letting you have fun with it. I think overall they did an excellent job on the game, but it's not like there isn't room for improvement. And I'd also like to point out, I waited for this game for a couple of reasons, right? Like, part of it is just like I know the story of Z and Dragon Ball just in general, inside out, but especially Z because that's what I was exposed to first. That's what I watched all the time growing up. I watched it when it was just on like regular TV for a spell, and I watched it when it hit Toonami. And then when it was like that in both of those cases, watching the same episodes over and over again because that's just how it was run. And I grew up on like that, and like playing a lot of the games, so I know the story pretty well. And it's just like whether you're reading, watching, or playing, If you're a Dragon Ball fan, chances are you know the story of Z super well. So that didn't make me super excited to actually get the game because like I played so many Z games, some of which are really good. It's just like, oh, do I need this, right? And the other thing though was the price because like right, that hasn't come down for a while. I only got it this time because I caught it on sale, and I only got the DLC packs because they were cheap enough at this point. There's still two other DLC packs like outside the ones I mentioned that are for like Bardock and Trunks. And I didn't get those because those are both like 19.99 a pop, at least on the PlayStation Store. I'm like, oh, nope, it isn't worth it, especially for stories that I know really well. And I know that they do some different stuff there, and notably in the Trunks case, but it's just like it's not worth $40 to do that. And yes, you could get season passes, but those aren't cheap either. So for me, I had to get this game on the cheap before I gave it the chance that it admittedly deserves. But it's just like that was a mathematical thing too. And back to the mathematical part to kind of like wrap this up. Like that was one of the parts I liked the best because I like the characters and the story of Dragon Ball. I like the action, but I also like how math is kind of used throughout, and like we don't always think about that, but it's there and it's cool. So yeah, Dragon Ball Z Kakarot. I enjoyed it. It's a good game, no, a great game. I didn't say at its best it's an excellent game, but it could still actually be better. And I would have liked to see those parts, but from the parts that I didn't like, it didn't detract from like the awesomeness. It didn't detract from my joy from the game, and that's worth something, right? That's worth saying something. So if you haven't played it, yeah, I don't think if you like the story of Z that you'll be disappointed. There'll be parts where you're disappointed, but overall, I think it's a good ride and that you might enjoy it. If you have played it, feel free to discuss it with me. Talk about your favorite moments. Talk about what you like, what you didn't like, what really stood out to you. That being said, I hope you all enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next one.